Hey, what's good, people? It's been a few weeks since I posted a video on YouTube asking you guys to throw your questions out to me about the signals, the collection, my interests, blah, 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 blah. I've had some response back on YouTube as well as privately in private messages and whatnot and other forums. So I figured I'd hit a few of these questions you have about the collection and my interest in the signals and what have you. So let's go ahead and get to it. We'll start with the first one. All right. So the first question on everybody's mind, or at least the person who was asking it, was why traffic signals? Why am I interested in traffic signals? Where did it come from? All that. So the short answer is I don't know. I don't know where it came from. I was probably about maybe 3 years old, 4 years old. I just, you're a little kid, you're driving in a car with your parents or going somewhere, and you just notice these light up things 15 feet in the air, and somehow they're mysterious because they're so high up and you can't get them. And, a kid loves shiny light objects that light up. So somewhere along the lines, I was about 4 years old. I remember this semi vividly. Now that I'm in my mid 30s now. I got a toy set that had a traffic light accessory. It was like a Main Street set from the 80s. And it had a little traffic light accessory. And for whatever reason, I took a liking to it. And I just carried it everywhere. And then most kids kind of grow out of things, and like any kid, similar to me, you go to school, you start getting into other things, but the interest was always kind of in the back of my mind, and then I didn't really grow out of it, to say. But through childhood, I was always interested in the lights, and I was kind of wanted my own. Right around probably 6 or 7 years old, I got an interest in. I wanted to touch a traffic light. I never got to touch a traffic light. They were so high up in the air. So I had gone out. I think it was my grandparents at the time. There was a light at their corner, an intersection at their corner with a light at it. And my grandfather hoisted me up, and I was able to grab the corner of the visor, which I thought was the greatest thing in the world at 6, 7, whatever years old I was. But I'm sure it looked really odd to people driving down the street to see this kid going up and, trying to grab onto the bottom of a crosswalk signal visor, which happened to be Durasigs, by the way, at the time. So my very first signal I ever touched physically was a Durasig. So, and then it kind of fired up a little bit the interest when I was about 8 years old, or I just turned 8 years old, and I got my very first signal, which is this flatback eagle that's still sitting here all these years later in my basement. I got it as a birthday gift at 8 years old. So that since then things kind of got crazy, as you can see behind me. But that's kind of how it grew. It started kind of just an interest, and it faded a little bit, and other things kind of came up, but it was always kind of an interest. And just after I got my first signal, then I wanted, ultimately I got a vehicle light, red, yellow, green. I wanted to get the crosswalk, don't walk, walk. So I had my second signal ended up being a Durasig 12-inch pedestrian signal, which you can't see it, but it's right behind me, or in front of me, actually. And then from there, I was kind of done at that point, because by then I was probably about 10, 11 years old. And I didn't know anything about traffic signal collecting. I didn't know traffic signal collecting was a thing. I didn't know there was other people that were even interested in traffic signals. Then came the internet, about 11, 12 years old. For me, the internet was becoming a thing. So first website I looked at, one of the first websites I looked at was trafficlights.com, which is Lights to Go. Lights to Go had a link page with various websites, including Signal Fan. John, the community knows him as Signal Fan. It's John Riedfeld. Found his website, found a few other collectors' websites, and then I found websites that sold surplus signals. So I got my third, which is the Long Groove Econolite. And from there, my fourth was the 3M in 2002 from another surplus site that's no longer in business, and it just exploded from there. And now I have 14 of these things hanging around. So yeah, that's the not so short version of where all this kind of started. Question number 2: does my wife and kids like the collection? Well, my wife tolerates it. I think a lot of us married guys in this hobby and with this interest can say kind of the same thing. Our wives just kind of like, whatever. As long as it doesn't get crazy, do what you want kind of thing. And that's kind of how my wife is too. She just kind of like, yeah, as long as it doesn't go crazy through the whole basement or, all over the place and it stays kind of in an area, fill up the area as you wish. So I did so. As far as my kids, I have 2 kids. I have a 5.5-year-old son and a 2.5-year-old daughter. My daughter sort of notices them when she's down here in the basement playing around. My son has taken a huge liking to the Signals, and he's already starting to learn some of the brands. He knows Durasig, he knows Innolite, he knows 3M, he knows some of the brands. He can pick the brands out when we drive, which in my area is primarily Eagle stuff, so Durasigs and LFE and things like that. He can pick the brands, which is Daddy's so proud. But he's also starting to learn some of the terminology in the cab. He's taken an interest at even 5.5 in the cabinet. Obviously, with my supervision, I have the cabinet open. He can see the different components, low switches, controller, monitor, all that stuff. So he's starting to learn all this stuff because ultimately this is all his inheritance someday when I'm gone. So, yeah, enjoy and good luck to my wife. All right, another question. Where did my cabinet come from? Where did it serve? And did my M50 controller come with the cabinet? I'll start with where the cabinet came from. Actually, I'll start with where the M50. The M50 did not come with the cabinet. The M50 was bought separately from a collector that is also a signal engineer in Georgia. I bought that back when the M50s were new or newer. So I spent a mint on it. Even on the collector's market, I spent quite a bit of money on it. And that ran my signals originally in a custom cabinet that I had when I was living at home before I had my own place. And I'm not going to get into the custom cabinet because it was a piece of garbage and it was wired all crazy and messy. And I couldn't wait to get rid of that and get the real deal thing. But that's where it started from. Was I wanted I kind of had an interest. I still have an interest in the newer stuff. So I wanted the latest and greatest controller, and that was the M50s at the time. Obviously, M50s now are they've been discontinued by Unex Traffic, so they no longer making them. They replaced the M60 and the Blade. So there's newer stuff, but at the time it was the new thing. And yeah, I wanted it, and when I got the cabinet, that got installed in the cabinet. And actually, that wasn't my first controller. My first controller was that I had was an Eagle Epic 140 controller, which is interval-based Eagle controller. So it's not phase-based, and these were hugely popular in Michigan. All over Michigan, they use these Epic 140 controllers. That one, for some reason, the power supply died, and then I had it repaired, and now it's not working again. It's just a finicky controller, so you can see why these sort of kind of fell by the wayside too. The first controller that I had that ran a signal head was an Eagle EPAC M36, which aren't very common. Usually it's the M30 or the M40 models. M30 just 30, and then there was the M34, I think, and then M40 came in M41 and M42, depending on TS1 or TS2. But those are the more popular controllers from Eagle. But the 36 ran my collection. First started out in the custom box, and well, it ended up the whole time in the custom box. And then when the cabinet, when I got the full size cabinet, I already sold it off by then. So M50 went into the full size cabinet, and then that ran the collection up until about a couple of years back. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I got I had a buddy of mine who used to work at Innolite. He's since moved on to another company, He and I kind of became good friends. He came over, we hung out, went to dinner when he was in town, and we just kind of networked a little bit. And he knew my interest in the new stuff, so he always kept in the back of his mind if there was a surplus controller that swung by his desk, that he would give me a call or just shoot me an email. Or well, it ended up he didn't email me or call me at all. He just said, "Hey, you're gonna get something," and I knew what it was. So he kind of it was kind of like out of the blue. There wasn't we're looking for this for you or whatever. It just was, here, we're sending this to you. And he paid the company paid the shipping and the cost, and it ended up being no charge to me. And that's the X2 controller that's in the cabinet right now. So that's the short-ish version of the controllers. But the cabinet itself it came from Texas, from a collector, or he used to be a collector. I don't think he collects anymore. And it served, I think, at Mandeville Lane and some expressway. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was in like the DFW area, Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas, or some suburb of it. It was originally a 4-phase controller, so it had been modified around by the prior owner, and I used it that way. It was originally a TS1 cabinet, and then I bought the TS2 guts separately, and installed all the TS2 stuff in there, the BIUs, the rack, detectors, all that stuff. So I built it up to what it is today, and it's kind of built for a hobby environment. So certain switches I didn't connect because I didn't feel the need to connect some of the switches and things like that, but I have most of it connected. So it works well. There's for collection, there's no power panel. There's no room for a power panel in the cabinet because the cabinet's not big enough to house the TS2 stuff and a power panel. So I just hardwired the AC directly to the back panel. So it's kind of crude, but it does, as you can see, it works, and everything works in it. Detectors work, and the controller operates MMU, everything like that. It's just I don't have at some point I want to put either a mercury relay in it or some kind of solid state, because when I do go and trip the controller, when the load switches are on, the load switches and you'll see problems at intersections where the red light will be flashing and the green will be on. So red and green are at the same time. That's because the mercury relay failed. I don't have a mercury relay in this cabinet, so when it does fail, it leaves the load switch outputs on too. So not a huge deal for me because I don't go and trip the monitor all the time. So it's very rare that it happens. But when it's in time-based flash or startup flash, load switches aren't. Well, time-based flash, load switches do the flashing. Startup flash, the load switches are not even on. So it works for startup and things like that. So that's the cabinet. It was originally, like I said, TS1 cabinet, basic TS1. I think it was a 4-phase. And then now I upgraded it with all this new equipment. So, and it's very, very tight now as far as space. So, because the cabinet wasn't designed for a TS2, 8-phase panel. It wasn't designed for that. It was designed for like a 2 or 4-phase cabinet. So it's very, very snug in there. Ultimately, someday I might get a larger cabinet. It's just getting it down here might not be too easy, especially the way that my basement door is and whatnot. But you never know. It could happen. So we'll see. But that's the controller and the cabinet and where it's off service roughly. Here's a fun one. What's my favorite signal and what's my least favorite signal? Oh boy. Get ready, kids. Let's go. Favorite signal. I can probably tell you my least favorite signal easier than my favorite. My least favorite is probably the McCain PED that's down here. There's nothing special about it. That was kind of an impulse thing. I was at one of the Ohio Signal meets, and I bought the housing. And the LED array or the LED panel, the hand and man, was in a free pile. So I just threw it up, and I was like, oh, well, look at a housing for it. And I think I spent like $20 on it, and, could have done something else with that $20. So, but it's hooked up, it lights up, and yeah, it's not my favorite. So, I don't think it's not a low on the totem pole as far as favorite, but that Durasig PED back there, that was another Ohio Signal meet special. That actually came from that was built off of two OSM meets. The housing, the body came from a free pile or like a raffle pile. So, we all get raffle tickets and you get to pick out from a bunch of junk parts that were lying around. So got that. And then I think a year later or 2 years later, I went to one and the lenses, the walk and don't walk lenses were offered and I picked those up. So this originally had a hand and man, plastic hand and man lenses, and then these don't walk and walk are glass. It's not a horrible signal. I repainted it so it looks good, but it's probably not high up on my list of hey, I got to keep this. So yeah, so that's my least favorite. So my favorites, well, if I have it in my collection, I have it for a reason. There's something I liked about it, so I got it for some reason. But my favorite is probably my flatback eagle, just because I've had it for all these years and got it from my grandfather, who's since passed away. So it's kind of near and dear to my heart with that, and it just kind of fired up the interest. That's probably one of my favorites. My other favorite is probably that GE back there, because I worked with a city in Southwest Michigan, Coldwater, to pick that one up. And did the trip out that way to pick up. I actually picked up two of them because there was a pair of them at the intersection that they were served at, and one I sold to another collector, so I kept this one and sold the other one off. But they're both still in Michigan, yeah, I mean, each one has kind of its own thing. The Dialight prototype light back there is kind of neat because I worked real close with Dialight to order that, because when I inquired about that, I had to get kind of on a list. Because they were not even done with the design yet when that was being kind of advertised as the next big thing, which it turned out to not really be the next big thing. It was kind of a prototype design that kind of went into their 15-year life modules that just go on the door. So they don't make that signal anymore. They never really went into production with that signal, just made trials and things like that and some show pieces. So bought that, had it ordered to my specs. I had it ordered as yellow, red, yellow, green, tinted lenses versus clear. That one's kind of cool because it was built to my specs, and I worked with the engineering team at Dialight and the sales team at Dialight, and then ultimately our distributing company locally that works with Dialight. So between kind of different groups and departments within Dialight and the Dialight distribution, that one's up there with kind of my interest. But yeah, there's really no, and I can go on and on about the other lights and other signals too. They're all kind of unique in their own way, and that's why that's kind of where my favorites are. There's not really a dislike, 100% dislike, 100% like. It's kind of, hey, if I got it in my collection, I like it. I wanted it. And if I don't want it, I don't buy it, or I ultimately sell it relatively quickly. So there you go. All right. How much money? Oh, don't tell my wife this. I don't want to. She's not home right now. So how much money do I have in signals? Well, I'm not going to get into the dollar amount because I don't want to know that number. But I'll tell you, it's a lot. It's a lot. But I've been doing this I've been officially collecting for the last 24, 25 years. So it's been many years, and I've had signals in my collection now. I've had signals that I've bought and I've sold. I've had signals that I've traded. Yeah, I mean, it's but if you add up all, I spent this much on this light, so much this on this light, and blah, 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 blah. Some of them I got more of a deal on. Some of them I spent a mint on, lights and controller equipment. It's probably in the couple grand. Yeah, it's probably in the couple grand. There's really no values. You can't really say that, there's a defined value for this GE 4-way, or there's a defined value for the 3M behind me, because it depends on the interest. Yeah, there's probably a higher demand for the older stuff versus the newer stuff, but ultimately there's no blue book value of what these things go for. You just kind of go on, if someone's interested in it, they'll pay for it. And if there's a large demand for it, they'll, throw some more money at it. So, but yeah, I've got a couple grand in this stuff. So that's kind of where I'm going to go with that. All right, one last question for this round because I'm way over what I thought I was going to be. My last question is kind of general, and I'll answer it kind of general. So, where do I get these things from? Where do these signals come from? Do you just, I'll tell you one thing. It's not the funny ha-ha way of people that come up to me. Oh, will you go up on the pole with a pair of wire cutters and cut them down? No, I don't. Usually, to get them legally, the course of action is these are retired. The signals are typically retired by whatever municipality they're coming out of, and a contractor is the one called to take them down. So the contractor then kind of has free reign, unless the state comes in. Sometimes the state says, hey, we want this equipment back to inventory it or whatever they do with it, or want the scrap value for it. But the contractors, sometimes they have free reign to it, so they'll take it down, and then one of two things. The contractor will have, or there'll be a collector that'll have a contact point with a contractor, and that's how these come in. There's auctions that happen, municipality auctions, contractor auctions that happen that this equipment kind of goes out into the public realm. And then once it's in the public realm, it can get tossed around between collectors. Some people want usually if you're not in it as a hobby, people usually want a traffic signal for a bar in the basement or at a restaurant. You'll see them hanging, or depending on the decor, they will have a light or two, a signal here and there, But yeah, that's kind of how it starts. Is usually to get on the private market, it's got to come on the private market from either someone who works with the contractor or knows the contractor, or through some kind of auction system. Another way that these come on is collectors like myself will go, contact the cities directly, especially if it's a smaller town. Usually can't get away with this with the larger towns, larger cities, too much red tape in government, but usually the smaller towns, like the GE is my example. That was a very small town, Southwest Michigan. I just contacted the city public works about them. I knew about the signals because I've seen them in service years prior. So I knew they were there and then they came out of service. So, that's kind of how that went. So I worked closely with the city management and the public works management and got those bought. But yeah, that's the main stuff. And then there's always the option that you buy new. It sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. See, the problem with buying stuff new is people don't understand. Collectors don't understand. It doesn't have to be collectors. It can be anybody that wants traffic light. Don't understand how much these things cost brand new. Yeah, you can buy a Durasig or something on, polyLFE or LED signal head on eBay for $100. But when you want to buy them new from the factory, you're talking hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands of dollars. So my Dialight was $500. So, a poly signal with LEDs in it being $500 is pretty pricey. One of my priciest signals that I have in the collection. I spent more on the GE, but when you want to buy, you can buy stuff new. Sometimes the manufacturer will say, "Hey, we don't do any selling through the factory. We go through a distribution network called the distribution network." Depending on the signal manufacturer, usually the big ones, Eagle, Econolite, McCain, things like that, they don't sell directly to the public or directly to anyone. They go through a distribution network, and then it's up to the distribution network to want to make the sale or not. In my experience with the distributors in this area in Southeast Michigan, they're pretty good about wanting to sell to the public, but they're hesitant just because people have sent them emails, inquiries, and we want to buy this, we want to get this. And then they find out here's the purchase order and it's going to cost this much money, then they're like, no, I don't want that. And they'll ghost the distributor. They won't respond at all, or they'll say, thank you very much, blah, 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 and then disappear off the planet. So the salespeople that I've talked to with the distributors are very hesitant to sell to the public. They will, in most cases, they'll try to, but they're hesitant because they don't want to get all the way through all the chains of command, sales and purchasing and all this stuff, and then find out that the whole thing was for naught. So they really want serious buyers. So if you're not a municipality and you're not buying pallets and pallets and pallets of signals, and you just want one or two, they're like, well, how serious are you? Because I don't want to waste my time. So I've had the fortune to work with this distributor locally on a couple of signals, and they've been very, very accommodating for me. But you pay the price. There's no haggling of can I get it for $75 because I see it on eBay for $75. No, this is what it costs. Take it or leave it. And that's kind of how you got to work with these distributors. You gotta this is the price, and if you want it, buy it. If you don't waste my time. So I haven't had any problems with any buying signals from anyone and whatnot, but I've tried to buy a signal that's still in service, and I've inquired about it for several years on and off, and the city is just not willing to budge on it, which is unfortunate because it was actually the very first fixed four-way light I've ever seen in person. I remember seeing it when I was about 4 years old, and I always thought it was unique. It was so different from the clusters I was used to, the typical Durasig and Eagle and things like that. But and it's still in service to this day. It's in permanent flash mode. It's up north in East Tawas, Michigan. So yeah, I've tried. I've contacted the city manager. I've contacted their public works department, and they don't really have much history about. I just know that particular light was installed for a school, and when the school was closed and demolished, they put it in flash, and it's been like that since probably the late 80s, early 90s. So, but we'll see. We'll see. That's just one that they keep pushing back, and we don't want to. If it comes down to it all, it's gonna go to auction or it's gonna be thrown out or whatever. But for now, they're saying it's not going anywhere. So I guess that's probably good that it stays in service. So that keeps the historic value of the light still hanging there. It's still in service, and although not fully functioning, it's flashing, permanent flash. But yeah, overall, not really any negative experiences with buying traffic signals from various means, but that's kind of where you get them from. There's no honest collector or hobbyist in this hobby, in this community, steals them. I don't steal them. I don't advise people to, it's on the ground, fell off a pole and go grab it. First of all, it could be live. So that's a danger there. You don't know if it's going to zap you or not. And two, it's just not worth it. There's signals that you can get from the manufacturers and distributors, and there's the collector market where they've been on the collector market for years and years. And yeah, do it the right way and enjoy the hobby. All right, guys, that's all I'm going to get to today. I went way over what I thought I was going to do for this video. So, but I'm open to other questions. If I didn't answer your question, you got a specific question about the collection or the signals or whatever, feel free to comment, and I'll get you in the next video. All right, see ya.